Good morning. Welcome to Bellingham Unitarian Fellowship. I'm Reverend Paul Beckel. I want to first start by saying thank you to Elin Pilo, who is playing piano for us today. I want to say thank you to Brian Drake, who is out in the narthex painting extemporaneously, and he's got quite a challenge before him because, well, he offered to do this, to paint as I'm speaking on the theme of today's service. So, those of you on Zoom, I hope you've been able to watch it. And it will be shown again on Zoom at the beginning of coffee hour. We have coffee hour every week right after the service, both for people in person, just downstairs, and for those of you on Zoom, we also have coffee hours. So please stay around. You'll be able to see how Brian's painting has transformed, and then you'll be able to talk about that or just meet new people or whatever one does at coffee hour. And I really want to make a special welcome today to those of you on Zoom. We reach out our hands, our hearts, our spirits to you. So we want to convey clearly that we are one with you. I have heard from people who join us via Zoom because they have not felt safe. And I'm not just speaking about concerns about disease, not just feeling safe about being seen in a queer-loving congregation, but because people are being shot in houses of faith all over the world and of all kinds. And my heart breaks to think that you cannot be with us. My heart breaks to know that this is the world we live in. My heart breaks for you, but also for us, because it is a loss for all of us to not have you here if this is where you want to be. And my heart is full, too, because I know that our Unitarian Universalist tradition has at its core a liberatory message to counter the growing culture of exclusion, self-centeredness, and fear-mongering. Along with so many allies, we celebrate here pluralism, inclusion, justice for the marginalized, and hope for the future.
shall take my voice wherever there are those who want to hear the melody of freedom, or the words that might inspire hope and courage in the face of despair and fear. My weapons are peaceful, for it is only by peace that peace can be attained. The song of freedom must prevail. Paul Robeson. Please join me in sharing our covenant. Love is the spirit of this fellowship, and service gives it life. Celebrating our diversity and joined by a quest for truth, we work for peace and honor all creation. This is our covenant.
Thank you, Joel. And please rise with me in body and/or spirit. And we're going to sing today our gathering hymn number 347, Gather the Spirit. Number 347 in the gray hymnal. And this is the time when I ordinarily turn to the children and share something. Today, what I have to share, my voice is not the right voice to share it. So we're going to have a video of the poet Amanda Gorman, who says she's the one who wrote this poem, and her voice comes across so strongly because she lives the meaning of this poem. However, because we are in a church, I am required by law to notify parents that the following video contains a message of transformative love.
One day, come to ask for When day comes, we ask ourselves, where can we find light in this never-ending shade? The loss we carry, a sea we must wade. We've braved the belly of the beast. We've learned that quiet isn't always peace. In the norms and notions of what just is, isn't always just is. And yet the dawn is hours before we knew it. Somehow we do it. Somehow we've weathered and witnessed a nation that isn't broken, but simply unfinished. We, the successors of a country and a time where a skinny black girl descended from slaves and raised by a single mother can dream of becoming president, only to find herself reciting for one. And yes, we are far from polished, far from pristine, but that doesn't mean we are striving to form a union that is perfect. We are striving to forge our union with purpose, to compose a country committed to all cultures, colors, characters, and conditions of man. And so we lift our gaze not to what stands between us, but what stands before us. We close the divide because we know to put our future first. We must first put our differences aside. We lay down our arms so we can reach out our arms to one another. We seek harm to none and harmony for all. Let the globe, if nothing else, say this is true. That even as we grieved, we grew, that even as we hurt, we hoped, that even as we tired, we tried, that we'll forever be tied together, victorious, not because we will never again know defeat, but because we will never again sow division. Scripture tells us to envision that everyone shall sit under their own vine and fig tree, and no one shall make them afraid. If we're to live up to our own time, then victory won't lie in the blade, but in all the bridges we've made. That is the promised glade, the hill we climb, if only we dare it, because being American is more than a pride we inherit. It's the past we step into and how we repair it. We've seen a force that would shatter our nation rather than share it, would destroy our country if it meant delaying democracy. And this effort very nearly succeeded. But while democracy can be periodically delayed, it can never be permanently defeated. In this truth, in this faith we trust, for while we have our eyes on the future, history has its eyes on us. This is the era of just redemption. We feared it at its inception. We did not feel prepared to be the heirs of such a terrifying hour, but within it we found the power to author a new chapter, to offer hope and laughter to ourselves. So, while once we asked, how could we possibly prevail over catastrophe? Now we assert, how could catastrophe possibly prevail over us? We will not march back to what was, but move to what shall be, a country that is bruised but whole, benevolent but bold, fierce and free. We will not be turned around or interrupted by intimidation, because we know our inaction and inertia will be the inheritance of the next generation. Our blunders become their burdens. But one thing is certain: if we merge mercy with might and might with right, then love becomes our legacy and change our children's birthright. So let us leave behind a country better than the one we were left. With every breath from my bronze-pounded chest, we will raise this wounded world into a wondrous one. We will rise from the gold-limbed hills of the west. We will rise from the wind-swept northeast, where our forefathers first realized revolution. We will rise from the lake-rimmed cities of the Midwestern states. We will rise from the sun-baked south. We will rebuild, reconcile and recover in every known nook of our nation, in every corner called our country. Our people, diverse and beautiful, will emerge battered and beautiful. When day comes, we step out of the shade, aflame and unafraid. The new dawn blooms as we free it. For there is always light if only we're brave enough to see it, if only we're brave enough to be it.
And for those of you kids who are going off to your classrooms, I know some are staying, some are not, but we're going to sing you out.
You want an intro on this one?
Yeah. We hold you in love as you go, as you go. May your heart be at peace as you go. To nurture the spark of your precious life. We hold you in our love as you go. And please breathe with me now. Get yourself into a position at once comfortable but alert, relaxed but still here. Breathing easily, deeply. Slowly. Let's join together in the spirit of peace and well-being. And I invite you now to know that we are limited. I am limited, you are limited, we are limited, and that's okay. It's okay, more than okay, to tell the truth about who we are. We needn't be afraid to say the obvious. We can't fix it all. Maybe I'm afraid to say it to myself because my heart will break. There's so much pain comes in from so many directions. If I have the principles that I proclaim, can I just see it unfold and not be the solution? Well, I think one way of going forward is to grieve. To grieve, of course, the suffering, but also to grieve the limits of our capacity. Grieve the reality that we cannot heal all the pain, nor can we prevent that which is going to come into being tomorrow. There is a gap between what we can do and what we so long to do. Just a gap, sometimes it feels like a chasm. But if I can say that out loud, I can keep coming back to the work, not having unrealistic expectations, not being distracted by trying to do it all, and having my mind and my hands in so many places at once that nothing happens. so I grieve today and may have the courage to do it again tomorrow. Again and again, but in between all of those grievings, may I feel gratitudes and speak gratitudes, recognize them all around, to empower me, to share them with you, to empower you. And finally, this blessing. Blessed be the vigilant. May they know rest. Blessed be the vulnerable. May we learn from their courage. Amen. Let's expose the lie of moral righteousness disguised as religion, used to reinforce systems of oppression which bring out the worst in all of us. My purpose today is not to horrify you with visions of hell on earth. What good would it do? To generate more fear, only to paralyze and discourage us. Instead, my purpose is to explore with you the underlying rationale for religious fascism and refute it with religious principles that have and will continue to affirm and promote liberation. If the word fascism seems too strong, that's fine. Nothing I say here should be taken as gospel. More importantly, even gospel here shouldn't be taken as gospel. Take what is of value and leave the rest. So be it. Words are all too commonly pressed upon us under the pretense that they mean the opposite of what we once commonly understood them to mean. What we used to call censorship is now known as freedom. What we used to call absurdity is now known as truth. What we used to call teaching history is now grooming or hurting the feelings of people who have always thought they were superior. Exploitation is now called my God-given right to take whatever I can get. Brandishing a weapon is now called being a good Samaritan. Bad faith, as a legal concept, means dishonesty, or more specifically, sneaky bad intentions. In a legal context, it's bad faith to attempt to persuade others with arguments that you know are untrue, or you don't care if they are true or not, as long as they lead to your preferred, predetermined conclusions. Bona fide, on the other hand, from the Latin bona, good, fides, faith, good faith, to show that we are bona fide, what we do has to be consistent with what we say. I'm probably going to get choked up a few times, so bear with me. But to remove Amanda Gorman's book, a book about caring for and getting along with each other, to remove this from elementary school library shelves, as happened this week, is an act of bad faith. It is not consistent with the ideals or the example of Jesus, who is all about inclusion. To applaud when Target pulls rainbow-themed products from its shelves because their employees are being threatened and harassed, as happened this week, is not consistent with the civic ideal of free expression. The legislation about to go into effect in Florida, protecting doctors' so-called freedom of conscience by allowing them to refuse to treat LGBTQ patients because of any religious, ethical, or moral beliefs. To support such legislation overtly violates do unto others as you would have them do unto you, which has been expressed in so many forms by religious traditions around the world as a foundational article of faith. To ban teaching about the causes and effects of racism is to bear false witness against one's neighbor, a central tenet of the Ten Commandments. And to require the Ten Commandments to be posted in schools, public schools, is just as wrong as posting the Unitarian Universalist principles. Imagine a teacher doing that, promoting the inherent worth and dignity of every person. It's unthinkable. Throughout history, authoritarian regimes have arisen in different forms. Some are based in an appeal to order. They ground themselves in the authority of rules, norms established long ago, to be enforced by men carrying out God's will until the end. Other authoritarian regimes, instead of strict rules Same thing, on and on, to conformity. Another tack based on an appeal to charismatic individuals whose erratic declarations are perpetuated by enthusiastic subordinates determined to crush those outside the fold. So it comes in very different forms. And you've seen this rules-based track and the charisma-based track operating today in both political and religious regimes. The basic characteristics of fascism are the same, whether we're talking about political or religious fascism. Longing for a lost golden age, that church and state were one. Machismo, in the form of denigration of women and sexual nonconformity. Machismo in the form of Christian militarism and the rhetoric of taking on the armor of God to do spiritual battle. Machismo in the form of contempt for the weak. Those in power exploiting the frustrations of middle and lower classes to fan the flames of resentment and division. Fear of difference, insisting that a chosen few are superior, and constantly creating new enemies. The enforcement of purity codes, both ideological and sexual purity, with exceptions only for those in charge, and disgust for the impure. Enforced also by the threat of ostracism, which works especially well in this age of loneliness and isolation. It's too easy, though, to analyze and criticize others. To what extent am I this way? Are we this way? We need allies to hold us accountable. Now, I'm talking about Christian Unitarian Universalist allies and Christians of other traditions who understand that Jesus was an anti-fascist. Jesus, who taught fearlessly that the entrenched hereditary religious officials of his time had no legitimate authority. Jesus, who encouraged his followers to overturn the systems of exploitation which were built into the everyday religious assumptions and practices of his time, taught those things even at the fear of death, at the risk of death. I don't know how much he feared, but definitely at the risk. Let's take a look. We have time for just one key Christian concept, Jesus' crucifixion, and consider alternative ways to understand it other than the ones you may be more familiar with. To fundamentalist Christians, the crucifixion was an act of God the Father, the sacrifice of his only Son. They emphasize his only Son as if it wouldn't have been such a big deal if he had had two, or if he'd had a daughter. To murder his Son in order to save humanity from the sin of being born of woman. By this understanding, the crucifixion was a one-time event, long ago, that has nothing to do with the here and now, other than to help us distinguish those who are not, those who are within the fold from those who are not. A more liberatory understanding of Christianity is that the crucifixion was not the desire of an angry, vengeful God. Rather, the meaning of Jesus' life plays out again and again in the lives of the poor and the marginalized, and that the Bible is meaningless unless interpreted by and through the eyes of the poor and the marginalized. And that crucifixions are taking place still today all around us. But those trying to live the way of Jesus are being persecuted and killed all around us, here and now, again and again, not because God demands this. God doesn't think, oh, you guys lost, you're losers in the lottery of life, so you must be a hapless sinner. No, their dying is not just. It is not God's will. It is a function of avarice and turning away from the truth of our being one people. So then what is a liberatory Unitarian Universalism? The original Universalists specifically believed in salvation for all because a loving God, they said, this theory was primarily expounded, at least in the thread of tradition that has led up to us in the late 1700s, insisting that all humans would be saved because a loving God could not possibly send his loved ones to eternal torment. Now this evolved for the next couple of centuries through the 19th and the 20th centuries. Universalist language has shifted less from salvation to liberation, but essentially to mean the same thing, but rather than salvation in the hereafter, to mean here and now in this world, that all must be understood to be equal, whether in the eyes of God, in the eyes of the law. But we must understand that we are one, and whether it's God or how we treat each other simply on some secular understanding of ethics, we can't separate out some and only care for others. Salvation, liberation, we have allies in religious traditions around the world using similar words like enlightenment, all meaning essentially the same thing. Escape from the illusion of separation. The foundation of our UU liberatory message is grounded in experience. Direct experience of that transcending mystery and wonder, which moves us to renewal of the Spirit and an understanding of our oneness with others. Our inspiration is founded in the words and deeds of prophetic women and men who have confronted structures of evil with the transforming power of love. Our tradition is grounded not in the dictates of authorities, but on our own actual experiences of loving and being loved. And this experience of loving and being loved, guided by the principle expressed in different words in different traditions. Again, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. means we wish for others the experience of loving and being loved in the same way at our peak experiences, and that we act to make this come about. We're going to sing. Thank you, Ian. Number 317. We are not our own. Unitarian Universalism has always been about curiosity, asking questions, intellectual exploration, the delight of looking at things in new ways, and conversing about interesting ideas. And this is still the case. But compared to when I first ran into Unitarian Universalism 33 years ago, I think our focus on conversing about interesting ideas was back then a disproportionate piece of what we did. I think today we are experiencing significant change in that part of our identity because we are taking on a more expansive view of who is us. We're better understanding that many have never had the luxury of triviality, inconsequential conversations and debates. I'm not saying let's feel sorry for ourselves for this loss, but let's acknowledge that Unitarian Universalism has changed, and it'll feel like a loss sometimes, maybe unnerving, maybe, and let's just get over this, maybe even paralyzing because we thought it was something else, and it has evolved into something greater. I don't believe that by coming to being able to articulate and proclaim a liberatory message that we're going to be able to convert everyone, nor do we have to. We do not have to fix the whole world by ourselves. What we can do, though, is to create settings and systems and opportunities where it is easier to be kind and compassionate and inclusive rather than to have the incentives go the other way. Peter Morin, who co-founded the Catholic Worker Movement with Dorothy Day, said, "We must make the kind of society where people find it easier to be good." Little things, I'm sure, can make such a difference. I'm thinking about educators and public employees, librarians, probably feeling very discouraged at times. How important it can be for us to simply say thank you, to tell them that what they are doing is important, when what has meant so much to them to provide educational materials and provide access, make space for exploration. We have to go in there and say to them, you are doing the right thing. All around us, maybe there's some display at the library or elsewhere that has some controversial message. Tell somebody there that you appreciate that. When there are reports of violence and oppression in the newspaper, I am sure that the victims are getting so much hate mail. The victims are getting so much hate mail. Maybe other places, but also in Whatcom County. Could you send out thank you letters? Covered, the envelopes covered probably in rainbows or hearts or stars or something, because I imagine they might be afraid to open it to see what's in there. There's probably some of you who are good at one part of this and some of you who are good at others. Maybe some of you are good at tracking down or keeping track of who needs a word of encouragement and finding out how to reach them. Others of you are good at writing messages of care and hope. I bet there's somebody here today, several of you, who could figure out who's going to do what, and make that happen. Writing letters to Planned Parenthood employees who get so much pressure to stop the good work they do. To U.S. postal workers, whether you see them on the street, or I don't know how you send a letter to the postal, but you know, I'm sure we can come up with something. Everything that I used to think of as mainstream, schools, libraries, museums, parks, roads. We need to tell people who are fixing our roads, instead of calling them lazy slackers, say thank you. I am, I suspect you are, I think everyone is feeling a little rough right now. So we need to be kind whenever we can, in whatever ways we Is it next going to be trash haulers who won't be allowed to pick up composting because it's too organic? Or fire stations? Pretty soon we're going to be seeing people standing in front of their houses, burning behind them. And when the firefighter rushes up, they're going to say, no, no, I'm a libertarian. Liberation is not a one-time thing accomplished long ago. Liberation is not bestowed upon us by others, nor is it something that we can achieve on our own. Not a one-time thing accomplished long ago, not something to be bestowed upon us by others, and not something that we can accomplish all alone. Liberation, the escape from our illusions of separateness, is an ongoing process that we live with and through one another. We live it through gratitude, through our growing self-awareness, and by returning to community, even when we've been disillusioned by lack of progress. You are beautiful people. Do not let the systems that incentivize you to be selfish, keep people who are different away from you. Do not let the messages of fear, the messages that some people's way of being in the world is to be pushed aside. Whether the message is to tell you that you are superior or you are inferior, those messages are both incorrect. They are fascist. They are trying to control you. We have a more powerful, sometimes more fun, and clearly more beautiful and loving message to celebrate together. Amen. We are so glad to have visitors among us today. In the pew racks in front of you, there's a little buff-colored slip for your contact information. If you would be so good as to fill that out, and you can just place it in the baskets as the ushers come around today. We'll let you know what's going on here. We're not gonna sell. Seriously, we're not gonna sell your contact information. And if you want to know even more about what's going on here, go to buff.org and subscribe to the midweek update. And just keep showing up. Talk with anybody else here. Some are longtime members, some have been here for a few weeks. Everyone's going to have a different perspective on these things. So be it. That's okay here. Bring yours. And as the ushers come around today to receive your gifts of love, know that financial generosity is vital, but so is all of the other ways that you have, because you all have different resources, but all the other ways that you have of fulfilling the call of love. Ian, thank you for filling this room with your music today. Brian, wherever you are, thank you for filling our world with the art that I'm really excited to see what you've come up with. And yeah, filling the place, he may be located to a sense out there, but all forms of art that console and inspire us, I think, make it easier to be good, make it easier and more unifying, and it challenges us, the music and the art, to be aware of ourselves, aware of the world we live in, but it also lifts me up and helps me keep going. Let's sing together a great piece of art written in poetry and tune by Rick Herman. In the back of your gray hymnal, In the Silence. Please stand and let's sing. If our hearts could burn like fire, if our voices be the wind, we would give what all desire, freedom, joy, and peace within. Come what may in these dark days, all our hearts are standing. right, Edelman. God protect us and keep us from being hypocrites, attention huggers, blamers and complainers, magic bullet seekers, snake oil salespeople. God protect us and keep us from being lone rangers, fair weather workers, braggers, takers, and just talkers. God send us and help us to be moral gorillas, nitty-gritty doers, scut workers, detail tenders, long-distance runners. God send us and help us to be risk takers, team players, organizers and mobilizers, and servant leaders, that we might live in peace and save our children. Let's circle around for freedom.